Hello and welcome to Chin Hairs and F-Bombs Conversations with Girlfriends. This is your gal pal Sal, aka SallyAnn Gray. Today, this episode, we are going to talk about grief and the transformative power of grief. So I know this doesn't sound like a super fun, happy topic, but the good news is I am here with my friend Barb. And we are going to talk about some hard stuff, but we're also going to have fun. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to talk about today and what we do at this podcast, this is Conversations with Girlfriends. Barb and I are old friends. We're just going to chat it out. She has been feeling some grief recently, and so have I. So we're going to share some about our grief journey, what we're feeling, some of the gifts of loss. We're just going to talk about our experiences and hopefully share some experiences that maybe you have also felt. And maybe we can just be in this together. I always feel better after talking to a girlfriend. So I hope that you do too. So let's get into it. Let's do this thing. I'm SallyAnn. I'm your host today and always. I'm calling you from Maine. I'm a 44-year-old woman living in Maine with my mister and my 2 children. I am a writer and a Midwesterner at heart. And I don't know what else I really have to say about myself. So my lovely guest today is Barb. Barb, do you go by Barb Grundy Evans? Or do you go by Barb Evans? Tell me the deal.
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that question.
Amazing.
Most of the time it's Barbara Evans, or I just go by Barb when I'm not including last names.
Yeah.
Legally, it's Barbara Grundy Evans. It's different on my driver's license.
Okay.
It was just this whole thing that seemed like a good idea at the time when I got married, and there's just been so much regret of it's just been complicated ever since.
And I feel kind of stupid asking you this because we've known each other for 5 years and I feel like an idiot. You're Barb. That's who you are.
Yes.
So my lovely guest is Barb, and please introduce yourself to the earballs that are listening right now.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Barb. I am a 54-year-old woman. I currently reside in the almost exact geographic center of Pennsylvania. I am single, divorced. I currently am living in a redefined family. So it's me, my adult daughter, and her partner in a house that we've built together, which is its own adventure. I'm a graphic designer most of the time. And I'm also a runner. I self-identify as a runner. Those are things about me.
I like it. It's weird to introduce yourself to strangers, isn't it?
Yep.
How do I boil this down to one sentence or whatever? Yeah. It's like I am multifaceted. I don't know how to explain this to you. Okay, so the way that Barb and I know each other is we both signed up for a business coaching group and met each other through that. And I was like, I like her. I want to be friends with her. And so I reached out. How did it go? How did we become pals?
I certainly remember having my own experience in the class of being like, oh, this is one of my people. Yes. Yeah. And then I think it was probably you that reached out or said, hey, maybe we should do some stuff.
Yeah.
Together. And then you were really amazing about bringing projects that we could both work on. And we did some really cool shit together.
I know. Yeah, but we built a foundation as well. That's a beautiful thing, is that we built a friendship, a relationship that blossomed in its own ways. And we have done some great projects together, work projects. But I consider you a friend first.
Yes.
And, a partner in crime business-wise second.
Yeah. I was just remembering and being really tickled by the time that I was vacationing up in Maine in Emden, and we got to go have lobster rolls in real life together.
Yeah. Yes. So Barb lives in Pennsylvania. I live in Maine. They are not next to each other. Geographic little lesson here. In the 5 years that we've known each other, we have only got to see each other's faces in person once. And thank you for making that happen. Barb was vacationing in Maine and said, let's meet up. And so, yeah, we had lobster rolls and we got to hug each other. And how lovely.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
So that's how we know each other.
That's how we know each other. Oh, also, one of the lovely things that we do together is virtual coffee, which is one of the ways that I developed my relationship with you. Was I was like, hey, in real life, I would invite you to coffee, but you live in Pennsylvania, so can we meet through the power of the computer and drink our coffee in our respective offices and chat? Yeah. And so every 2 weeks-ish, we do virtual coffee. And how brilliant we are to do that. What a great way to stay in connection and develop a relationship.
Yeah.
Cuties. And that was one of my joy shares one time, was our virtual coffees.
Lovely. Yeah. It is like, it's such a fun thing. And when I tell other friends about it, they're like, oh, that's such a good idea. Like, yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. Steal this idea.
Yes.
All right. So we did it. We introduced ourselves. We told our little love story. Ooh. So let's get into why we're here. Let's talk about grief. Fun. So, all right. Barb, I'd love you to start. So tell us what you're currently grieving. Tell us about it.
Okay. So just a little over a week ago was the anniversary of my mother passing. And as you might imagine, there's a lot still to process. You know, it's a lot. I've been through a lot of firsts in this year, and this was the first anniversary of her passing, and coming up on her on like a birthday and a Mother's Day and things like that. But what was really interesting or going on for me in the last week or so was rebuilding of the energy and feelings of grief. Like they were coming, like they'd been put away for a while. Everything was okay, you know, and even though I am okay, and I feel like I did a lot of processing at the time, I knew from my experience with grieving other things that it's not a once and done process. So I knew that there were going to be things that I needed to revisit or wanted to revisit, or were going to require additional attention from me. And it kind of started with, you know, I got this lovely message from the funeral home a few days ahead of the anniversary of my mom passing, and sharing, you know, the memory wall that people will fill in and they'll write things about their own experience. And it recalled to me the sort of such a variety of people that my mom was friends with and who she touched, and like different aspects of her life that I didn't necessarily get, you know, visibility once I had become an adult and moved away. So it was really interesting to kind of make those connections with other parts of her and her life.
She had a whole life outside of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How dare she? But yes, she did. But also really feeling, again, love and support of all the people that showed up for me during that time. You know, I had some like a women's group that I was involved in that sent flowers. My best friend from grade school showed up. You know, you want to talk about waterworks and the whole thing. And like a really good friend of mine that I just met in the last few years, like he came all the way out. Like it was a big long drive, but he came out for that. My ex-husband came to the service. And so it just was like this. It was nice to revisit those feelings. I have this idea that funerals are actually for the living.
Totally. 100%.
You know, and to revisit that moment and that connection. And there's a certain slowing down and quieting that happens when I really touch into feeling that she's gone, but also feeling like how carved out in time that moment was. I'd been with her for the days leading up to the time she passed. I spent the last evening with her and did
Mm.
This, all right, I'm going to get a little woo, a little weird,
Go
but
for it.
I did this almost like ritual, but I made it up as I was going along. And I was holding her hand. She wasn't conscious, but she would occasionally grip my hand. And I really thought through all the places where, like, we had agreements that wounded each other, and I won't go into the psychology of all that, but you have agreements with your parents, and you're both doing the best you can, and sometimes those agreements can be painful or hurtful or not healthy, especially if you continue those agreements into adulthood. So there were just a lot of things that I still needed to clear with her, and I sort of, and like, of course, you can continue to do that work after the person has passed, but it really felt important to me to
Mm-hmm.
do it at that moment for her and for me, like and I had this visualization of like this, all these threads connecting us, these golden threads of connection and exchange. But there's this big snarl, a big complicated mess. And I sat with her and breathed and visualized slowly unpicking the snarl, unpicking all the knots. And when one pulled free, sent her end of the thread back to her and my end of the thread back to me. And eventually I got the whole thing clear. And like my hair is standing on and remembering it. But I also really
Mm.
felt like in that moment, like I knew it was soon. And I remember when I finished the snarl thinking, all right, mom, you're good. We're good. You're free to go. It's all clear. Everything's forgiven. We're good. And really also remember at the time feeling like I was there to kind of help open the way for her. Like a really weirdly felt a lot like giving birth. I don't know how else
Mm.
to describe it energetically, but it really felt like that. And the next morning I was driving back to the hospice where she was, and they called to let me know that she had passed. And at first I was really sad that I hadn't been there with her
Right.
at that
Yeah.
moment. But I remember the hospice nurse saying that she said, I see this again and again with mothers, that they pick their time. And it's when their children, they want to spare their children. So they leave quietly when the kids aren't there.
Oh, goosebumps.
Yeah. So, and this is the person who sees this all the time.
Yeah.
So, incredible witness.
Angel hospice
Yeah.
workers.
Yeah. So that was another interesting touch point last week, was that I also heard from the hospice grief support people. They reach out, they call, they check in to see how you're doing. Yeah, really lovely, really lovely. And I checked in. I mean, my sister and I checked in with each other, and we
Mm.
both have our own very different ways of grieving, I think, and processing this. But we're both like, you good? You
Mm.
need me? We're
Mm.
like doing my own thing, and for me, that was giving myself space to just take it slow last week, to know that I was not going to be at 100%. I was definitely weepy all week, anything, not like super intense, but like just anything would be a little bit choked up, a little tear in the corner. It could be music. It could be
Mhm.
something beautiful. It could be something, that where I'm watching someone, some kind of connection point between other people, anything. Because I think being that close to death and to grieving a person passing really tunes you into the aliveness of everything else around you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I have been the last week or so. It's certainly, you know, lighter now today than it
Yeah.
was a week ago.
I told you I'm really proud of you. Like I'm your mom. I'm really proud of you for realizing that you needed to take it slow and giving yourself the space, giving yourself the compassion
Yeah.
to do it and the understanding because we
Yeah.
both know what happens when you don't.
Yeah. When you
It just doesn't
power
work that
through,
way.
Yeah, it catches up with you. Something else falls
Mm-hmm.
apart, breaks, doesn't go well. You're going to come apart one way or another.
Yep.
If you make space for it, it's maybe less catastrophic.
It's a little more graceful, perhaps.
Yes.
So thank you for
Mhm.
sharing. And I am really sorry about the loss of your mom. And I get it too. I mean, I know your grief is personal
Mhm.
and your relationship with your mom is unique and it's the only one of those. I am also currently grieving. My recent losses are my 93-year-old grandma
Mhm.
just passed away. And I am realizing how special it was to be in my 40s and have an alive grandma. I apparently I come from hardy stock. So she passed away. It was really long journey of dying. She was actively dying for like 3 months. And
Mm.
it took a toll on a lot of us. Yeah, she's 93 and like, no, I didn't think she was going to live forever. But you go through a lot while someone is dying. I've lost people slow and I've lost people fast. And they're both hard. My mom was able to be by my grandma's side, so is her mom, through the last 3 months of her life. And that was really impactful. It was really impactful for my mom's relationship with my grandma. And that was good and hard.
Mhm.
And I'm really glad my mom got to do that with her. And they did a lot of healing.
Mhm.
My mom did a lot of healing. And I can guess that my grandma did too. And it was really, really beautiful. And I'm so glad my mom had that opportunity
Mhm.
and took it because it wasn't easy. My mom spent about 3 months living in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and my mom lives in Missouri. So that's not easy. She was away from her husband and her daughter and grandchild and dog. So that's one grief that I've been feeling. And also I lost a friend. She was only 50 years old and she died from brain cancer.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's hard.
And yeah, it was awful. She's one of these beautiful souls, this delightful gift to humanity, brightness, and to have that spirit extinguished at 50 is very hard to take. And, you know, it, it makes you think about your own mortality, not to turn her death into, let's talk more about me, but it does. Like
Mhm.
losing someone reminds you of how temporary all of this is and how we can go and how anybody near us can go.
Mhm.
And it's not fun to grapple with, but here we are. And man, being in my 40s, whoo, baby. Okay, now people be dying around me.
Mhm.
Like, okay, this sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I have lived through a lot of loss, unfortunately. Yes, the grief I'm feeling right now is around losing my grandma and losing my friend Jamie. And 3 years ago, I lost my therapist,
Mhm.
and that was deeply painful. And 10 years before that, when I was 31, I lost my father in law.
Mhm.
And he was another one of those beautiful people. This isn't fucking fair.
Mhm.
How dare you, universe? Situations. He was 53. He was just an amazing person, and he got pancreatic cancer.
Mhm.
And he fought it as long as he could, 2 years, which is impressive. And then we lost him. And I was pregnant with my first child. And oh my God. And Ben and I were by his side when he passed. And I was singing Amazing Grace, welcoming him to the other side. Oh, dear God. And when I was 27, I lost my bio dad. And man, 27 is a early age to lose a parent.
It is.
That was so hard. I was a baby. I didn't know what I was doing. And I did not know how to grieve. It was a mess. I was a mess 3 years ago when I lost my therapist. I did not know how to grieve that. I mean, for God's sake, I lost the person I should have been grieving it with, my therapist. And it came out sideways. My grief came out sideways because I didn't deal with it. So what happens when we don't give ourselves the space? We touched on that. And the ways that I coped, air quotes, maladaptive coping, I drank too much. I was numbing myself. I didn't know how to feel all of my feelings. They felt too big. And I was numbing with alcohol, numbing with all kinds of things, but I was pushing the feelings down. And it did not work. I suffered greatly. And so did my family. Everybody around me suffered while I was suffering by not dealing. And I had to come out of that nosedive and start to really grieve her. And it took longer. It took longer. I mean, there's no timeline. There's no, oh, it takes 1 year and then you're good. You know, wouldn't that be nice? No. But, you know, things pop up. Like, yeah, you spoke of the firsts, right? Those first, the first Christmas, the first birthday, the first anniversary, the first Father's Day. But then also things just knock you off your feet. It's a smell. Or a sound.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, you're just transported into your grief. And that's not something you can plan.
No. I think we're not often provided with great role modeling for grieving. And because it involves feeling your feelings the whole way through. And so many of us, again, did not have great role models for that. And so what we see or what we saw was numbing or avoidance or squashing it down. And so those are the things that we did also. And I don't know what was different about the grief I had around my divorce, but it was different. And it was so painful on levels I had not ever experienced before.
And that no one could have prepared you for.
No.
Right.
No. And I think somehow in that pain, I was like, this stuff that you've been doing is not going to get you through this. You've got to do something different. So I started researching, reading about grieving, and all the things that were taught kind of about it are just so not. Like, don't grieve alone was one of the first things. I was like, oh, really? Oh, we're supposed to just go like, you know, curl up in the fetal position in the shower and cry there so no one can hear me. And then come back out and act like everything's fine. So I should just seek other people who are going through this. That's wild.
Novel idea. Yeah.
And also for the first time, really prioritize taking care of myself through grief. And it was a learning process, believe me. But I was like, you know, while I am going through the pain and this taking apart of, you know, of myself and my life. And while I'm trying to figure out who I am, if I'm
Mm.
not this anymore, alcohol's off the table. Like I was like, I can't do that to myself,
Good for you.
because I had in my life some hard lessons about how that goes
Hmm.
with other people.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not doing that.
Smart.
um, and I also was really fortunate to be in the position to just rest. So I worked a
What
tiny
a
bit.
privilege.
Yeah, it was such a privilege. And I
Yeah.
really recognized that. Like, I was in a financial position where I didn't have to show up to a job 80 hours a week to
Yeah.
keep it together. And I found my first sisterhood at that time, like a
Mm.
women's network, people going through that same experience. And wow, what an important moment that was for me.
Mm.
So like, because that was the community where I was able to safely share that grief and the experience. And people said, I get it. And I knew
Can
that
you,
they did.
can you say more about that? Like, tell us what that community was.
Okay. Yeah. So it was a women's group online. It was a community of women going through the exact same kind of loss and experience. And it was also kind of founded and cultivated by one of those like special, magical, incredible people. And she really created a safe space and was doing some beautiful writing that we could all be like, yeah,
Mm.
that's my experience. And there was room for us also to like have discussions. And it was completely anonymous also. And so ultimately that became my first introduction to like finding a community of
Yeah.
people having experience. I had been really isolated prior to that, I think, relative to like
Hmm.
grief and processing and just lived experience.
Yeah.
So finding that first community of women who are going through a similar experience and being able to have conversations with people, even though, they were on the other side of the planet, literally, and to be able to make those connections and really be seen and heard and
Yes.
believed. And actually, fun sidebar, I met some of those women in real life eventually,
Yay.
which was really, really cool and really lovely, and kind of like one of those beautiful gifts
Yeah.
of going through that process and finding the connections that are going to help you heal. And sometimes you make some lifelong connections out of those, and that's
I
been
know.
really lovely. So divorce has been its own kind of grief and processing, and it's a slow picking apart of something that had been built together, and loss of identity, loss of security, financial and emotional.
You're also grieving a future that you thought you were going to have.
Yep, absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And grieving the loss of my own history. So much of my life, most of my adult life, spent built with this person. And I felt like I didn't have claim to those stories anymore, and also didn't want to tell them, couldn't tell them in the same way.
Oh.
It wasn't our thing. And it's weird to tell it without him there.
Mm.
There were moments where we had these brilliant adventures, and it wasn't just me out there in Yellowstone National Park hiking into the backcountry. It was me and this person. It was our adventures, and so like there's a loss associated with that too, especially when those stories are so make up so much a part of your identity.
Right. Did you ever feel like you rewrote your own history after the fact? For better or for worse?
Yeah, so I definitely, in the processing of that, your memory is so malleable, and it's
Hmm.
actually a really good thing because you can retell those stories in ways that are supportive of how you identify now and who you are now. And I think especially when I think of some of the challenges in the marriage, and I look back and I know now we were both doing the best that we could, and it's really okay. But yeah, there's definitely some things I went back and it's been quite some time. So some of those stories I can just sort of look at with distance and affection, and without the same level of pain. But what's interesting is that where I live now, like, this is where it all started. This is where I met that person. And unexpectedly, springtime, the daffodils being out, there's so many specific memories that are coming up around that stuff, the context here, that it's like I actually had to sit down and I kept being like pushing it away. Don't think
Yeah.
about it. You're through that. And then I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. What am I really feeling right now? And it's like, if I'm being honest with myself, I miss him right now, here. Like I miss him and me, whatever we were, 19 and 22, running around, having adventures, being silly, exploring the quarry, whatever, like,
Yeah.
and I just really had to let myself feel that,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's also like logically it's kind of icky. Part of me is like, that's what's happening. Of course that stuff is coming up when I'm here for extended period of times like I used to be. And like all those memories are located in places here. And as I drive past places I haven't been in, 30 years, I'm like, oh, I remember that. And we did this. So there's just been a lot of that. And for some reason, particularly in the spring here, feeling a lot of grief around those reminiscences and the loss of that origin story.
I want to talk about the gifts of grief.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned, the lovely people that showed up for
Mm-hmm.
your mom's funeral. And I had that experience when my dad passed. My childhood best friend drove 8 hours north to go to my dad's memorial.
Mm-hmm.
And it meant the world to me. And the people that show up for you at that time in all the different ways that they can show up. Doesn't have to be driving to the funeral, but the ways that they are there for you is such a hug and so beautiful and such a reminder of who your people are.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that reminder. I just feel that loss gives us perspective over what is and isn't important.
Mm-hmm.
It just, when I was 27 and I was in my 20s, I was bopping around, I was having fun, and then boom, my dad was gone in a day. And I gave so many fewer fucks about the little things after that. I could not be bothered to give a fuck about dumb, we call it goofy ass shit.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't be bothered. I could not be bothered to care about goofy ass shit. I couldn't be bothered to care about friends who weren't really actually friends.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in your 20s, you kind of have a lot of those.
You do.
You do. In your 20s, it's a little bit of quantity over quality, which is fine. That's the time, But then all of a sudden I was just like, no, And the gift that comes from that, I mean, there's a lot of gifts there, but one of them is that I used that opportunity, and I've used it over and over and over, this opportunity to realign how I spend my time, attention, and money to the things that I truly value the most. It is just this absolutely cutting of the fat of like, I fuck the piddly shit. Not for me. Unsubscribe.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky enough. This is what I'm saying about losing my dad. Tragically, I was lucky enough to learn that at a young age. And okay. Another thing that you mentioned was support group and finding people, finding a community and not grieving alone. Oh my God. You're right. I totally agree that like we do feel like we're not supposed to burden people with our tears. Oh my God. And it isn't true. And the best thing that I did when I lost my dad to suicide, the best thing that I did was I joined a support group. And it was in person. And it was hard.
Yeah.
And I almost didn't go every fucking time. And it was the best thing I did. I
Mm-hmm.
sat in a room with a bunch of strangers who had also lost someone very important to them from suicide. And we all sat around and talked and cried and were there for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And for an hour out of a week, we felt understood, and we could say weird feelings that we were having that didn't make any sense and we didn't
Mm-hmm.
like and we didn't want to admit, and everybody else knew exactly what we meant.
Yeah.
And that community and that space to be able to talk about the hard things, best thing I did.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, you can make some lifelong relationships out of that. I have a dear friend, Jessie Peters. I hope to have her on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And she's my soul sister. And we met each other in that group. And that is a lifelong relationship that I have with her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's beautiful. And I wouldn't know her in any other way.
Yeah.
Something beautiful that I did while my grandma was actively dying. And every day I would get the call or the text, today's the day. And it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
She was a tough old bitch. Go, Granny, go. But one evening I had time to myself and I spent some time with my memories of her.
Mm.
And I spent some time with my favorite memories of her. And I did this thing called tapping. Yeah, some people know it, some people don't. For me, it's related to EMDR therapy. And so I just tapped on my arms, left, right, left, right, left, right. And it does this weirdo thing, the sciencey weirdo thing, but it engages the left and the right sides of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And some wild things can happen from that. It was just me and my brains.
Mm.
And I started thinking about my grandma, and I put myself in the home that I associate with her. And so that's the home that she was in through my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And so I visited the different rooms, and I was in the front room, and I was remembering the light, how the light came in that room. And my grandpa sat in that chair, and my grandma sat in that chair. And I sat on the floor, and I played with my Teddy Ruxpin. And I remember, so cute. I
Mm-hmm.
loved him so much. And I remembered the record player. It was one of those cabinets, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't thought about that record player in 30 years. And I took a tour of that house in my mind while tapping in my basement while my grandma was dying, and spent time with her in those memories. And I was able to excavate some memories that I hadn't touched. I didn't know they were there. I didn't know they were accessible. And they were beautiful. They were wonderful. Remembering the cookies that she used to make and how I would sneak some.
Mm-hmm.
And playing in the backyard with my cousin and all of her Barbies. She had all the amazing Barbies. I loved it so much. And the lefse that we would have at Christmas. And it was so wonderful. It was so nice to spend that time honoring these memories that I had with her, these shared experiences that I had with her, with my other family members. I don't see that much. And that was such a good use of my time.
Mm-hmm.
It was so beautiful. Nobody told me to do it. I didn't even know I was going to do it. I was just like, well, I don't know. I think I'm just going to tap on my arms and think about my grandma. And that to me was more valuable than going to a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
I grappled with, did I go to her funeral? Because that would have been an epic undertaking for me to
Mm-hmm.
get from Portland, Maine to Sioux Falls, South Dakota would take like planes, trains, and automobiles.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said about how funerals aren't really for the dead, they're for the living.
Mm-hmm.
And there's good to that. I mean, a funeral is like a family reunion with tears,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And good. Like, we don't all get together that much anymore. Like, none of us do. We feel like through the power of the internet, we're connected, and that isn't the same.
Yeah.
It's good, but it's not the same.
Mm-hmm. I think what you've described is this lines up with this belief that I hold that grief is actually a powerful, generative, life-giving force. And I really associate it with springtime. No, in no small part because I've got all kinds of these moments happening in the springtime, but it also, like, grief breaks you open and allows for brave new things to grow out of the breaking. And I think you see that all around us if you're in a zone of the world where there's springtime. Stuff is out here breaking out of the earth and coming out of buds, and everything's breaking open, and
Yeah.
it's messy and intense, but man, is it good. And I think that grief has some of that energy too. Like, grief is about an ending, but it's also the beginning of the next thing.
For
And
everybody
that's one of the,
involved.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's really, really beautiful. Thank you for sharing your experience and journey with grief. I'm going to share a story related to grief. So, this is story time with your gal pal Sal. And this happened after the passing of my father. And it was hard for me. It was really hard for me. And I am his only child. So there was a lot of death admin and bullshit that I had to go through. I was this like teeny tiny baby 27-year-old who like doesn't know anything.
And you're thrown into this role of having to suddenly know how and
Yeah.
handle all the things.
Yeah. And so I was still paying his mortgage. I was trying to close out bank accounts and credit card accounts and stop cable companies and utilities and just all kinds of, it was a lot of stuff. Yeah. And I was really angry. That's an easy emotion for me. Anger feels simple. And oftentimes anger shows up when we have more complicated feelings going on. Mm-hmm. And so I was very angry at this time. I was really, really angry at these businesses that were like trying to get my dead dad's money. Mm-hmm. And I was just furious, like, at capitalism, and I was taking it quite personally. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was in my office, in my home office, and Ben was in there too, and I was dealing with some of the stupid ass death admin, and I was so pissed. And I was just like yelling at a computer screen. Yeah. And I said something absurd, like that I was like pissing venom. And Ben is an engineer by trade. And he went into fix it mode. And he was like, okay, well, what can I do? Like, I'll call them and just do this and just, and I stopped him. And I was like, I don't need you to fix this. I just need you to listen. And it changed our relationship. Wow. It was the first time I saw that he was trying to fix a problem. He was trying to problem solve his way out of this because that's what he knew and that's what his brain do. Mm-hmm. And that's very sweet. And also, I don't need it right now. And to have the words to communicate to him, I don't need you to fix this. I just need you to listen, was life-changing. And it is one of the gifts that my dad gave me from that loss, was learning better how to communicate with my husband.
Wow. That's huge.
It felt big, and I still use it to this day. You know, I identify like, oh, I know what you're trying to do, and that's sweet, but it isn't what I need.
Yeah.
And we all do it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right. Right. We want to solve problems. It makes us feel helpful.
And we don't want to watch the people that we care about struggling or suffering,
Totally.
you know, and
Yeah.
so it feels like if we fix it,
Yeah. Let me
then it's
fix
all
this
better.
for you.
Yeah.
But it wasn't what I needed.
Yeah.
And I was honestly shocked I even knew that. Oh, it's taken me so long to figure out what I actually need. That's it. That's my whole story. It's a little one, but
It's an important story.
it is, and it was. Okay. So now we get to share our joy share. So I'd love for you to go first. Can you please share one thing, anything big or little, that is bringing you joy right now?
So this weekend, I went to visit a friend at her horse farm. It's her husband's birthday / retirement party. And it's always lovely to visit with them. Their place is just so nice and it's so peaceful. And it's the best Airbnb you never paid for. It's so nice to be. But what is bringing me joy right now is I met a whole bunch of people from their lives, lots of their friends, and in particular, a lot of my person's women friends. And what's cool about these women is that they were all my age or older and really just like vibrant, alive, smart, funny. I had all these amazing conversations. And there's one woman in particular who, over the course of the conversation, we learned so much about each other. She was 70. I was shocked. And not because you can't be amazing at 70, but like, I think I needed in that moment, because I'm in so much, like was in so much grief and kind of faced with my own mortality and really feeling like, what am I doing? Who am I going to be with this time left to me? And to meet a whole bunch of like, holy shit, on fire women.
Sweet.
who were like older than me. I'm like, all right, now I know.
Hell yeah.
And
Hell
I'm
yeah.
really excited about it. And a lot of them were like, we're clearly as happy to have met me as I was to have met them. And it was just a nice affirmation also. So like, I'm excited and, to go back and spend more time with some of those people. So
Beautiful.
giving me some ups right now.
I love it. Good. Cool. Okay, my joy share. I was talking with a girlfriend last week. It's actually Jessica Best, who was on a previous podcast. She was on my podcast about quitting corporate America. So I was chatting with her, chit chat, and I told, before I had started talking to her, I had been feeling really weird. I had some really weird energy and I had to get it out of my body. And so I did a 30-minute karaoke session in the lady lounge. I have a microphone set up down here. I literally can do karaoke anytime I want.
Amazing.
And I did. And I sang as loud as I wanted. And it was even amplified. Like I was already singing loud. And I was like, fuck that. I'm putting on the microphone. Anyway. And I told her that I had just, had fun singing because I had to get something out of me. This is like an embodiment practice for me. And I asked her if she had been singing lately because she is also a singer. This is a thing I know of her. And she told me that she doesn't really sing anymore. And I was so sad. And we kind of teased out like why this was. And it partially is because she doesn't have a commute anymore. So like car singing is out.
No singing in the car.
No singing in the car. When she's in the car, she's with her husband and she's listening to his music and she doesn't even really like his music. And I was like, boo, I know what that's like. Okay. And I was like, I have been there too. I actually lost my verve for music and singing a few years ago. And I found new music. I found some new to me female singers, totally girl power sort of stuff. Some of it's queer and in my range and fun to sing and dancey. And it lit me up. It brought me back to life. And then it reinvigorated my love for singing. And what a joy this brought to my life to bring music back. It brought in this color that it had been missing. And I told her about that. And then I asked her, do you want some music recommendations or something? Like, I want you to sing. And she said, I would love that. And so this is my joy share. Sorry, it took me a bit to get here.
Context.
Yes, thank you. I made her a playlist and I had so much fun making this playlist. I put in all this music that has lit me up in the last 2 years. And then last night, after I made the playlist, I was like, I'm just going to check it out, make sure it's good. And accidentally, I stayed up till midnight. I spent 3 hours dancing and singing in my basement. True story.
I love it.
The playlist is amazing.
You know, it's good when you lose all track of time and you're just in the groove zone.
Oh,
amazing.
I was grooving. I was jamming. So that's my joy share, is this playlist that I made for my friend. And you know what? It's public and I'm going to link to it in the show notes. So it's on Spotify. Yeah, it's called Singing is Good for You. And I'm going to link to it in the show notes. If anyone is looking for female singers that they want to sing to, that's pretty much what this playlist is. It is a 3.5 hour playlist.
I love it. I love it. You just gave me a really wonderful idea. I'm going to ask my friends, like people that have a hard time knowing what to get your adult friends for birthday. I'm going to ask for my friends to make me playlists for my birthday.
Cool.
Yeah. So thanks for that.
Nice.
My birthday's not for months, but I've got it written down. So we're good. It's happening.
Awesome. Perfect. That's like, it's experiences. Like those are my favorite gifts are shared experiences or practical things. I'm a very practical lady. So I like things that I can use.
Yeah.
Barb, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad we did this. I knew I was going to have you on the podcast. I have so many topics that I want to talk to you about. So you'll be back another time. But thank you for joining me, for sharing, for being honest and vulnerable. And I'm so glad we did this.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And to all of my listeners who made it this far, thank you so much for spending an hour with me and Barb. I hope that you got something out of this. I hope that you may have giggled a little bit. I hope that you feel like you just hung out with some friends. That would be so cool. That's really what I'm going for. So thanks. And until next time, this is SallyAnn Gray, and this is Chin Hairs and F-Bombs Conversations with Girlfriends.